What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. Let's just sit back and have a great conversation about the city of brotherly love. Philadelphia will produce some of the greatest fighters and trainers and venues and promoters that the world will ever see. My dad and granddad would often sit me down and have wonderful conversations with me about Philadelphia. They enjoyed it. They've been to many fights, visited many venues in Philadelphia. And they would tell me about how rough that city was, how tough the fighters were, what it was like in Philadelphia. And I would love to have that conversation with you. Of course, top of the head, just whatever comes to mind as I'm speaking with you, because I have a great deal of history of Philadelphia fighters. Like I said, I used to visit Philadelphia often. I would meet guys like Bob Montgomery and Harold Johnson, Joey Giardello, and many, many of them. So let's talk about Philadelphia right here on the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. Now, North Philadelphia would produce some of the greatest fighters. Fighters such as Willie the Worm Monroe, Smoking Joe Frazier, Bobby Boogaloo Watts, and Bad Benny Briscoe. He had Southern Philadelphia fighters such as Buster Drake, and he was known as the Demon. He would win a vacant IBF Junior Welterweight Championship title. He had Tyrone Everett, who was known as the Mean Machine. He was out of South Philadelphia. He was a junior lightweight, had 31 total bouts. Gypsy Joe Harris. He had 24 total bouts, 1 loss, and 8 knockouts. He would unfortunately have eye vision problems. Another fighter from Philadelphia, Sugar Ray Seals, would have his issues with his eye vision. And what was amazing, that they would also take on Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Marvelous Marvin Hagler, who was out of Brockton, Massachusetts, but he was originally from Newark, New Jersey. He used to train in 8th Street Gym. But I was at the fight when he fought Bad Benny Briscoe in 1976 at the Philadelphia Spectrum. It was one of the most amazing moments. After that bout, Marvin Hagler would pull the microphone and he would call out Ronnie Harris. You see, those days are no longer. William Caveman Lee fought from 1976 to 1988. Tyrell Biggs would win in 1984. Olympic gold medal championship, if you will. Jack Blackburn and Benny Bass. Benny Bass from Ukraine, Jack Blackburn, was a trainer for some great fighters. Sammy Mindell and Lou Ambers. Of course, he would have Joe Louis. But did you also know that he had Jersey Joe Walcott? You see, when Jack Blackburn would pass away in 42, he knew he had one heavyweight champion, but he didn't know he produced 2. He had Jersey Joe Walcott before Joe Louis in Camden, New Jersey. But Walcott could not continue because he had a family and he couldn't travel to Chicago. So in came Joe Louis in 1934. He turned professional and he would become a 25 title defense heavyweight champion, 12-year reign. But you would also have a fighter by the name of Roy Williams. His name was the Tiger, Roy Tiger Williams. He had 30 total bouts, 6 losses, and 22 knockouts. Georgie Benton, 62 wins, 13 losses, 1 draw, 37 knockouts. He was a #1 ranked for 3 years in the middleweight division. Jack Blackburn had well over 300 bouts. He was a lightweight. He was in the ring with fighters such as Dave Holly and Joe Gans, Harry Greb, and many others. He had Joe Butler, who was a colored middleweight champion. Tommy Coleman, who was a welterweight. He had Charlie Scott, had a record of 34 wins and 19 knockouts. Oh, he was a hard-punching welterweight. James Black and Gold Schuler, 22 wins and 1 loss with 16 knockouts. It's a middleweight, my God. He was stopped in 86 by Thomas the Hitman Hand with a beautiful straight right hand down the pipe. On that card, you had Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And you also had another fighter who I just think he was a good fighter. John the Beast Mugabe. It was a cold evening in Las Vegas when those two young men fought. And we all had to rent ponchos because it started raining. Sugar Ray Leonard was in the rafters, and Marvelous Marvin Hagler couldn't move side to side. And he had to slug it out with John the Beast Mugabe, who was 26-0 with 26 knockouts at that time. And that's when Ray Leonard decided to call Mike Trainer, who was his manager, get me to fight. Because he realized that Hagler couldn't move side to side. He didn't have any legs at that point of his career. He had Curtis the Hatchet Man Shepard, who had a record of 52 wins, 33 losses, and 33 knockouts. Now, Gypsy Joe Harris I talked about, 24 wins, 1 loss, and 8 knockouts. He was a welterweight, and he was also a middleweight. Now, you had arenas such as the Philadelphia Ballpark, 6,000 seats, between Broad and Hutchinson Street. 1904, you had Bob Fitzsimmons, and we take on Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. Oh, what a war that was. 1910, Al Hoffman and Bill Lane. 1919, Benny Leonard, who was known as the Ghetto Wizard, he would take on a Scotch Wop, Johnny Dundee. And Shrine Park was an outdoor arena of 35,000 seats, 21 Street and Lehigh Avenue. You had Benny Bass, who was from Ukraine, and Harry Blitman. You also had Kid Chocolate, who would take on those men as well. You Sammy Angott and Bob Montgomery. Bob Montgomery, who was known as the Bobcat. Do you know he was the promoter for the Blue Horizon in 1971? Bob Montgomery, who was the owner of the New York Sack, he would battle Bojack back and forth. They fought for $1 in their second contest at the great New York's Madison Square Garden. When you talk about boxing, its rich history is what makes it one of the great conversations that you can possibly have. The former America's light heavyweight champion, Gene Tunney, the first world heavyweight champion, Gene Tunney, would take on a fighter by the name of the Manasseh Mauler, Jack Dempsey. Gene Tunney would be the first fighter who would win the America's Light Heavyweight Championship and then the World Heavyweight Championship title. He was from Greenwich Village in New York. Now, there's many things I can say about Gene Tunney, but that's not for this conversation. But he was a master boxer. How do I know this? But not just fight films, but I knew a fighter and an old trainer and a man with great constitution that I spoke with many days as a young man. And his name was Paul Cavalier. He sparred with Gene Tunney many a times. Paul Cavalier was from New Jersey. Had a brother by the name of Art Cavalier. And they would train fighters in Lenny Shaw's boxing gym. That gym was located in, I can't think of the name of the location right now, but it was near Patterson. And it was right, I would say 6 blocks away from Lou Juva's restaurant. And I had great memories in that gym. But Paul Cavalier would be the trainer in that gym. Lenny Shaw's boxing gym produced some pretty good fighters. Now that was in New Jersey. Now Lou Nova would get knocked out in 14 rounds in brutal fashion by New Jersey's two-tone Tony Galento. June 28th, 1939, New York's Yankee Stadium. Ike Williams would knock out Philadelphia's own Bob Montgomery. And he would unify the New York Sack and the ring and the NBA World Lightweight Championship title. It would be in front of a crowd of 30,000, August 4th of 1947. And that New York Sack title was swapped around, beginning with Sammy Aingat when he would retire. And that left room for Bo Jack to take on Ali Stoltz. He would defeat Ali Stoltz, and he would get that title shot opportunity with Tippy Larkin in the great New York's Madison Square Garden. And Bo Jack would become the New York Sack lightweight champion of the world. Bo Jack, as you know, was from Augusta, Georgia. And he would have his wars. I mean wars. With Ike Williams the following year, 1948, and the final fight between those two would be in 1955 in Georgia, and both men would retire. Ike Williams, oh, what a hell of a fighter he was. He was out of Trenton, New Jersey, called him the Trenton Thunder. Ray Robinson would defend his world undisputed welterweight championship title in front of a sellout crowd of 20,000 spectators, 1949. He would defeat Cuban Hawks Kid Gavilan, 15 rounds. And then Ray Robinson would become Pennsylvania's vacant middleweight champion when he would take on Robert Villemain, June 5th of 1950. And he would move up to the middleweight division, had his eye on the prize. He wanted to take on, at that time, Marcel Cerdan. Didn't get him because Cerdan would lose in 10 rounds to Jake LaMotta. So Ray Robinson would take on Jake LaMotta for the fifth and final time. Now, let me speak one moment about Ray Robinson, and I want everybody to understand this. When they mention Ray Robinson against the Black Murderers Row, 90% of historians and people quite don't understand really what happened. Ray Robinson didn't duck the Black Murderers Row. What actually happened was, Ray Robinson turned professional October 4th of 1940. He was a lightweight. He had won the 1939 and 1940 Golden Gloves as a featherweight and as a lightweight. So when he turned professional October 4th of 1940, he was already a phenomenon. It was on the undercard, as I spoke about many times before, of Frizzy Zivic and Henry Armstrong. But that card was not selling out because Frizzy Zivic at that point in time in his career was on the 500 mark. You see, he lost 65 fights. So the tickets were not selling as well. And George Gainford would get a phone call because Ray Robinson was ready to turn professional. He wanted to try for the Olympic team, but the opportunity granted itself. So they put him on a card to open up the Garden. And everyone wanted to see Ray Robinson, who was this phenomenon as an amateur, turn professional. So that's what sold tickets. And Ray understood that at that moment, that he was a ticket draw. And this game was about money. So Charlie Berlin, Holman Williams at that time, Coco Kid, they had already had a professional career. It had already started. But when Ray started in 1940, you gotta understand, he was promised an opportunity, although he was not ranked in a lightweight division. And this is what everyone fails to understand, because they read and they don't understand exactly what took place during that time. Sammy Aingat was a master manipulator. He was known as the clutch. He knew how to play the game. So he would retire and he would come back, and he would retire and he would come back. Because when you did that, you didn't lose your ranking, and you would be able to get out of a fight. So they were using Ray Robinson for ticket sales. So the word around town was Sammy Aingat was going to give Ray Robinson a title shot. It was agreed. And all of a sudden, you got to understand that Sammy Aingat came into the ring weighing 136 and a half pounds. But he told Ray Robinson Ray, I need you to do me a favor. Because Angar couldn't get out of the fight. It was already promoted. I need you. He brought a sandwich and he bought sodas and everything, coffee over to Ray Robinson's hotel room. I need you to come in at 136, Ray. I'm the only one that's going to give you this shot, but I can't give it to you tonight. And Ray Robinson came in at 136 pounds, and then shortly after, Sammy Angar retired because he was threatened. When he retired, he would make a comeback. And this is where in 1943, Tippy Larkin and Bojack would meet one another in New York's Madison Square Garden. And this would be for the vacant lightweight championship title. And Bojack would knock out Tippy Larkin in 3 rounds. And how he got that opportunity, he defeated Ali Stokes. Because Ali Stokes was supposed to take on Tippy Larkin, and it was supposed to be a massive New Jersey rivalry. Bojack destroyed that opportunity, and he was forced to face Tippy Larkin. And Bojack would have 21 main event bouts in Madison Square Garden. Tippy Larkin would have 19. But Ray Robinson would eventually move up to the welterweight division. And in 1942, Charlie Burley moved up to the middleweight division. And he would take on Holman Williams, one of 6 times. And one of 7 times. But he would take Holman Williams' colored middleweight championship title. So that fight between Charlie Burley and Ray Robinson completely out the window. Now, what Ray Robinson understood, he was not going to be manipulated. He was not going to be involved in the Black Murderers Row circus that was going on, because he knew it was about money. And he was not paid what he felt he was worth, and what Charlie Burley was worth, and what Coco Kid was worth, and what Holman Williams was worth. The only fighter he was not interested in was Eddie Booker. But he took on little Tiger Aaron Wade. You see, Ray Robinson had sparred with a fighter by the name of Danny Cox. Cox was in the stable, if you will, with Gangsford and Harry Wiley Sr. Danny Cox was a heavyweight. Danny Cox used to work at the Harlem Opera House along with Spider Valentine and Ray Robinson for the summer. Robinson was an usher along with Valentine. One would work on one end of the aisle and the other one worked on the other end of the aisle. And Danny Cox was the doorman. It's on 125th Street in Harlem, New York, across from the Teresa Hotel. So Ray knew his worth. But I'll continue that story another time. That's the true story of Ray Robinson and Black Murderers Row. Jersey Joe Walcott would defeat the Cincinnati Cobra. Ezard Mac Charles was in defense of his World Heavyweight Championship title, June 20th of 1952. And he also fought him July 52. Now, Kid Gavilan would defeat Philadelphia's Gil Turner. Now, let me tell you about that fight. He would stop Gil Turner in 11 rounds. That was, to me, just about the greatest welterweight championship fight in boxing history. My God, what a fight that was. All these fights took place in Philadelphia. Rocky Marciano would knock out Jersey Joe Walcott in 13 rounds. You know where he knocked him out? Philadelphia. For 26 years, 16 cards at the Municipal Stadium, Broad Street, Patterson Avenue. Philly Phantom, world light heavyweight champion, Tommy Loughran, and the former world light heavyweight champion, George Compartier, will make their presence known in that arena. Now, when you look at boxing for what it is, you'll understand the history of this game. Philadelphia Ballpark, Bob Fitzsimmons, 6 no-decision contest against Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. 6,000 seat capacity, July 23rd, 1904. I spoke about Benny Leonard when he would defeat Johnny Dundee in 6 rounds, June 16th of 1919. Also 1919, you had Benny Leonard and Patsy Cline, 18,000 in the audience, August 11th of 1919, all Philadelphia Ballpark. You know, 1919 was a very special year. You had Jack Dempsey. He would become the brand new heavyweight champion when he would defeat Jess Willard. You had Gene Tunney, who would participate in the AEF, America's Expeditionary Forces, and win the light heavyweight championship title in those amateur games. And you had many, many other fights. Benny Leonard would also be in the ring with Soldier Barfield, defeat him in 6 rounds. September 4th of 1919. My God. You had Mickey Walker and Bobby Barnett, defeat him in 6 rounds. Harry Greb would take on Tommy Loughran. He would defeat him in 8 rounds. 22,000 spectators. It was a milk fund. August 24th of 1922, one of the greatest years in boxing history. Lou Tendler would defeat Ever Hammer out of Chicago, defeat him in 8 rounds. 20,000 spectators in the audience. September 11th of 1922, all in the Philadelphia Ballpark. Jack Ronard would defeat George Godfrey, the Leaperville Shadow. He would defeat him in 10 rounds. You had Danny Kramer, who was a very big influencer for Sam Langford. He would knock out Bobby Barnett. You had George K.O. Cheney take on Bobby Garcia, Harry Blitman, and Tony Canzanelli. Pete Latzo would take on Matt Argy, defeating him in 10 rounds. Kid Chalker would take on Benny Bass. Al Ator out of Philadelphia would take on Leroy Haynes. See, Al Ator was knocked out by Joe Louis, but he was a very good Jewish heavyweight fighter. A fighter that is not often talked about. Henry Armstrong and Benny Bass. Benny Bass was from Ukraine. And let me tell you about Benny Bass and Henry Armstrong. Armstrong fought Benny Bass in 1937 when he would have 27 fights that year, 26 knockouts. The only man he didn't knock out was Ali Spaulding. And that's the same year that Henry Armstrong was picked up the vacant, well, it wasn't vacant at the time, but it was vacant when he stepped into the ring. The NBA featherweight championship belt, but the New York Sack was on the line. And the champion at that time was Petey Cerrone. Petey Cerrone would miss out on the 1924 Olympic Games with Fidel LaBarba as a flyweight. Fidel LaBarba would defeat Petey Cerrone. But Cerrone would take the featherweight championship title as a professional from Freddie Miller. And they would exchange that title back and forth. But Henry Armstrong would knock out Petey Cerrone in 6 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden, and he would become the second, oh my God, as I think about it, unbelievable. He was the second unified black fighter to win a title in Madison Square Garden. The 3rd black featherweight champion. The first black American light heavyweight champion, or not, what am I saying? Featherweight champion. And that was a thing to behold. But Benny Bass was as rough as they came. And he would be in the ring with Henry Armstrong in 1937, part of the 27-bout contest that Henry Armstrong would have in 1937. Now, when you look at Shirai Park North Philadelphia, to 21st Street in Lehigh. It was 8 blocks away from the Municipal Stadium. And the Municipal Stadium, we just talked about that stadium. It had a rich history behind it. Johnny Dundee won a 6th-round newspaper decision. He'd be in the ring with George K. Cheney. He had 6,000 spectators in the audience. And it would rain because it was an open ballpark. Benny Leonard would knock out Johnny Kilbane. You know, when you listen to some of the bouts that took place during the time of 1920s and 30s, you would cringe if you were that into boxing, because the moments were unbelievable. It's like today if you were watching a fight when you had Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford, and 2 weeks later you would have Jaron Ennis taking on Keith Thurman, and then 3 days later you would have Deontay Wilder facing Anthony Joshua, and then 1 week later you would have Tyson Fury taking on Klitschko or so. And then 2 weeks later, that's what it was during that time. No pay-per-views. All you had to do was purchase your ticket and go to the arena. So as I study the sport and I pay attention to fighters such as Sammy Engard, when he took on Bob Montgomery, who was the former lightweight champion, and Bo Jack and Johnny Hutchison and Ray Robinson, who would defeat Sammy Engard. He defeated him 3 times, but he didn't get a title shot. Freddie Ray Cochrane didn't want to give Ray Robinson a title shot. You see how Ray Robinson was treated. Marty Servo didn't want to give Ray Robinson a title shot, although he defeated Marty Servo twice. Marty Servo would be in the ring with Rocky Graziano. He would suffer a busted nose, and that was his claim to get out of the fight with Ray Robinson, who he was scheduled to fight next. Then the war came. So in 46, Ray Robinson had to take on Ohio's Tommy Bell. Tommy Bell had a brother named Bobby Bell. And Ray Robinson had already defeated Tommy Bell. Bell would be asked, you want that opportunity? Because Bo Jack and Tippy Larkin was asked to face Ray Robinson. They both declined. Tommy Bell was the next man up. That contest took place in New York's Madison Square Garden, December 20th of 1946. You had the Arena Athletic Club, January 26, 1897. 18 fights, cards, during that time. You had George Dixon, who was the world bantamweight and the world featherweight champion, June 27th of 1890 and March 31st of 1931. That arena was open. You had Joe Walcott, who was known as the Barbados Demon. He performed December 18th of 1901. He won the World Welterweight Championship crown from Ruth Fern. They fought in Canada. You had Dave Holly. You had a fighter by the name of Mysterious Billy Smith would win the World Welterweight Championship crown. Young Griffo, Kid Lavin, World Lightweight Champion. You had some of the greatest fights that you can ever make at the Arena Athletic Club. Joe Chowinski and Peter Moha and Philadelphia Jack O'Brien. The matchmakers during those days was Jimmy Handler and Charlie Johnson. The Met Club had opened up in 1908, the Philadelphia Opera House, and then they would eventually change it to the Municipal Opera House, and that would become a boxing venue. 1930, you would have some of the great fights that would begin. November 18th, you had Gil Turner. He would stop Charlie Scott. That was the last show. Gene Burton, Billy Thompson, and Bobby Green, and Percy Bassett, Dan Buxeroni, Joey Giardello, and Ike Williams, and Keith Gavilan, Lou Jenkins, and Georgie Benton, Holly Mims, Billy Arnold, just to name a few. I'll do a part 2 of this video. I have so much to say. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Some of the greatest historical conversations you'll hear, because I have so much to say. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Be well. Peace.